Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. I am Tony Lynch. I am your host, and I want to say thank you for everyone who's going to be tuning in today. And before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head over to my YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, if you know anyone that can benefit from the conversations that we have, do me a favor, share this with them. Now, before I bring on my next guest, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. And if you have any questions or comments, put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer those as we go. Now, without further ado, you guys help me welcome my next guest, Miss Judi. How you doing, Miss Judi?
Good morning, Tony, or good afternoon to you. I'm doing amazing today.
How and good morning to you. So, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here today. And so before we get started, introduce yourself. Tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
Okay, so Judi, I'm from the UK originally. You'll probably get that in my accent, but you might get a bit of my Antipodean lilt that joins onto that. I'm now in New Zealand. So I've had a lengthy grief journey from my childhood through to now, really. And I'd never recognised that what I was suffering was layers of grief. And it was probably only when I hit the bottom and started trying to do some self-help that I realised that I had layers of grief. And as part of my journey to working through that, I trained as a coach and then as a grief coach, and that was all about really processing my grief. And that culminated in me feeling that calling to become a grief coach to help out other people who need a supporter, need somebody to accompany them on their grief journey. As you know, Tony, grief is it's an emotion that grips you. It's very difficult to be released from its grips, and some help with that is pretty important, and that's my life's work now, and I absolutely love what I do.
Well, I appreciate the work that you do, and big appreciation for that. I love connecting with people that has a passion for helping others that's going through it. And my question would be, you speak about your own grief journey. Would you mind sharing your journey with us?
Yes, absolutely. So I think one of the things is that we don't necessarily recognise what grief is and what causes grief. There's the obvious causes of grief, such as losing somebody that you love. But it took me a long time to appreciate that grief is simply loss. And depending on our life's path, we can have losses throughout our lives. And if we don't manage those losses, they become an accumulation, and then that grief comes to bite you. And that's essentially what happened to me. I had a childhood of benign neglect. My parents met our basic needs, but not our emotional needs. And I think, there were a lot of issues from my childhood that were unresolved. Fast forward to my teens, and I developed a chronic illness. And so I really sort of lost a lot of my future at that point. I was too ill to experience normal life for quite some time. And then I sort of came out of that a bit and had a bit of a normal life for a while, but I got into a relationship and married. And 2 weeks after we got back from honeymoon, my husband said, I don't want any more children. And part of the deal about getting married was that we were going to start a family. Mm-hmm. Complicate that with, around the same time, I developed rheumatoid arthritis, which was sort of a piggyback from my chronic illness, and then had periods of time when I couldn't walk, I couldn't use my hand, I simply couldn't lead a normal life. And so, I started to lose that expectation of a future, really. I was in quite a static place because I just couldn't do much in my life. I was on a lot of medication. I was warned not to have children on that medication because it would be negative to a pregnancy. Fast forward a bit, that relationship broke down mainly because of the lack of promise towards the children, but my husband spiraled into alcoholism and drugs. So there was a lot of grief there, and then I got into another relationship quite quickly, and that was intense, and then that ended. And when I came out of that, I had such physical symptoms. Not only did I have a chronic illness with terrible pain, but my body seized up and I was unable to move. And I consulted chiropractors, osteopaths, physios, all the usual sort of people when you've got bodily pain. And nobody could work out why I had this pain. Nobody could cure it. But of course, nobody talked about what was going on in my head, what I hadn't dealt with. And at that point, there were layers of grief, but I had no clue, Tony, that that's what was going on. And then so I spent some time on my own and perhaps processed a bit of what was going on. And then I met my current husband and we went through buying houses and moving across the world, and were, very distracted in our lives by all sorts of adventures, really. But with him, I felt safe. He was a completely different person. And at that point, into my 40s, I started thinking, well, do I want children here? I thought, yes, I do. But really, it was too late for us. And so mid-40s, I had to start working on, or I went into the depths of grief with the fact that I was going to be childless, not by choice. And that was a deep, dark pit because it was layered with all the past events. And it was only in my late 40s, when I was in such a horrible place, I was probably a horrible person as well, I stumbled across a book by a lady called Judi called Living the Life Unexpected. And Jodi Day is a pioneer for childless, not by choice ladies. She's been through her own dreadful journey, and reading bits of her book, and it's an uphill book to read, but because there's so much recognition in the book of what you're actually going through yourself, and lots of pennies dropping, bingo moments. But that really helped me see that what I was going through was actually normal. It validated my feelings, because you feel that you're abnormal. You feel that nobody else feels what you're feeling. And that started my journey to working towards my best life, basically.
Okay. Now, I guess my question would be, because you've had one hell of a journey, and and you talk about that dark place. Do you believe your grief changed you in a way to where that it turned you into a dark person?
For a while, yes. I mean, I think when we're hurting as badly as I was, and as you will have done, and anybody else who's been on a grief journey, you want everyone to see that you're hurting. You don't necessarily realise that that's what you're doing, but you're angry, you're bitter, you're resentful, you may be envious, and it doesn't make you the loveliest person to be around, because you're expressing anger in all sorts of ways, whether it's with your expressions, your body language, just your responses to people. I think you lose compassion towards others as well, because if you haven't got the compassion for yourself, you certainly can't find it for anybody else.
Right. Very true. Now, did that during that moment in your life, did that affect your relationship with your husband at the time?
Sorry, say that again. I didn't get what you were saying there.
I was asking, during that time, when you were going through that little episode in your life of the darkness, did that affect your relationship with your husband or your
Yes,
friends?
yes. Well, and I think it's multifaceted. I think that we were just not as joyous in our lives. We were doing things that were trying to put a shine on it, but you can't shine something up that's so negative. So we were sort of stumbling through it, but not in a good way. And he couldn't really understand what I was going through. None of us understand each other's feelings, because although we might share emotions, the way we feel those emotions is unique. So he didn't want to raise the subject, because if he saw that I looked happy, he didn't want to make me miserable. But I wanted him to talk about it, because I didn't want it to be a taboo subject. So you sort of turn this circle of not resolving anything, I guess. And in the end, what needed to be resolved was in me. And he was on the periphery of that. But with regard to friends, I went through a period where I thought, I'm not really making new friends here. And I felt lonely and isolated. But I realized that lonely was my default setting. Even when I wasn't lonely, and I've recently done a post on this, we can be lonely in a crowded room because we're not connecting with somebody. Nobody's understanding what we're feeling. And, since I've not completed, we're always on our grief journey, but since I've moved a long way forward from that, I'm making friends all over the place. And I realise it's probably because I'm listening to people, I'm connecting with people, I'm gaining that rapport with them that I just couldn't find at that time.
Nice. And now, when did you get that aha moment where you started to notice and say, you know what, maybe I need to change the way or deal with the things that I've done?
Yeah, so I go for a walk along the waterfront. I'm lucky enough to live by the sea, so I do that every day, and that's where all my best thoughts and decisions come along, really. And I was walking along the waterfront one day, and I'd happened to pop a podcast on, which I don't usually do, and a lady had retrained from being a police officer to a counsellor, which is quite a radical change, really. And she was talking about how rewarding it was and what her journey was. And I thought, God, that really speaks to me. That really resonates with me. How can I help other people? And I was on my journey, but I wasn't a long way through it. Now, that day, as I was walking along, my mum actually had a stroke at that time. She was in the UK, and it was just coincidental. And 11 days later, she had a massive heart attack and died. And so I sort of, at this time, I was looking into what sort of therapist I could become. How could I work with people? And so after Mum had died and we'd been through the funeral and that sort of thing, I started on a coaching course. And it was a generic coaching course, but we could specialise in an area that was important to us. And I decided that I would focus on the child-free or childless not by choice community. And partway through this course, the word grief coaching was mentioned. No more, just those words. And I thought, oh, wonder what that is. So I started researching it, and I researched it for a very long time because I couldn't find a non-denominational course and I didn't want to be too pigeonholed. And eventually I just stumbled upon a course run by this fabulous lady called Dora Carpenter, Grief to Gratitude, and that's run from Washington, DC. And that was a bit difficult for me to connect with because obviously there's some quite significant time differences, but we made it work. And oh my God, the bingo moments on that course, it was the most incredible experience, the most incredible journey. And it allowed me to process so much, to understand so much, to gain so much. It's just the best thing I've ever done.
Nice. Now, I am very familiar with that course, Grief to Gratitude, and I will tell you that nowadays, right? And it's everything has changed, opened up, and the doors and the resources that we have available now when it comes down to grief therapy or counseling or even groups out there have been phenomenal. The growth, and I'm not quite sure how it is in the UK, but I do remember a time where it wasn't so prominent, right? It was hard
Mhm.
to find groups out there. It's very few and far in between. And now, when we look around, there's so many people out there doing great work.
Mhm. Mhm.
The same in the UK, because I remember before COVID and then during COVID and after COVID, how everything kind of took a turn. And as far as having the amount of resources, available resources.
Mm. Yeah, I think the UK is probably better than New Zealand. Some of it's population based, some of it's that do we air our dirty laundry in public? And I think New Zealand is a bit more of a closed society in that respect. So I suspect that the UK is a lot better, and a lot of the CNBC groups that I see on perhaps Facebook are out of the UK and out of the USA. There's a lot less in New Zealand where I live now, and it's sort of trying to open up that dialogue with people to say it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to go and talk to somebody about how you're feeling. There's no judgment here. And I don't think New Zealand has necessarily been the home of therapy.
Mm,
And they're getting there, but it's going to take some time. So yeah, I think that I'm trying to be very open with people about what I do, so that they understand that they're not unusual, that they're not broken, that they don't need fixing, but
right.
they just need a little bit of help and guidance on their journey.
Okay. I love that. Yeah, and as you were talking about that, I started thinking about some of the challenges, and one main challenge that I see, and I want to get your thoughts on this. One of the main challenges when people are going through grief is earning trust, right? And not necessarily the earning trust with the people that are around. I mean, that's very important. But and I thought about this a couple of weeks ago. I was on a podcast with Miss Katie Healy, and I had mentioned, people have a hard time trusting themselves as they're
Hmm.
going through the grieving process. It's something that I've been thinking about and really diving into. And I want to get your thoughts on that. I want to get your thoughts on
I think when we're grieving, we have such a muddle of emotions that even separating them out is
that. Mm,
incredibly difficult. With my clients, I have a sheet that's got all the different emotions that would be associated with grief on it,
mhm,
just as a prompter, so that somebody's like, oh yes, that's what it is, because they can't always put a name to what they're feeling.
right.
And I think we go down a rabbit hole with grief where we can feel so down, but we don't know why.
Mm,
We've got this feeling in us, and unless we sit with it and think, right, where is that in my body? What is that actually telling me? We try and run away from it. We don't trust ourselves to deal with any of it because we don't know how to, and we
mm,
don't think we should be feeling those feelings. And one of the things about somebody coming and talking to you or I is the fact that they can say anything to us. It doesn't matter what they're thinking, what they're feeling. They're not going to surprise us. We're not going to judge them.
right.
We're just going to sit and hold space for them. And that was one of the things that was so valuable to me, was I could say what was going on, because we can't tell our mum or our brother or our sister or our best friend really our deepest, darkest thoughts, can we? Because we are embarrassed and ashamed about some of them. And actually, there's no embarrassment or shame necessary at all. But that's just, that's human nature to
Right.
feel, oh no, nobody else can ever feel like I'm feeling.
Yeah, I mean, that is very, very deep right there, because I think when we think about the grieving aspect, and especially the pain that we're in, it's such an individual thing, right? It's easy to take it personal, right? As well as everything else that surrounds you. And it goes way back to, I told someone, when you get to a point, you have to earn your own trust, right? You have to trust yourself to get up in the morning. You have to
Mm,
trust yourself to put the necessary nutrients in your body or get the necessary sleep that you need. You have to trust yourself to um, be emotionally aware of what's going on with you, but also trust yourself when things are hard, right? So that's 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 where I look at things like you have to earn your trust. And then once you can earn your trust, then it makes it easier for you to trust other people to walk with you, right? Because then I think that, and this is just my opinion, I believe that it will open up the doors for you to be that much more honest with the people that you're surrounding yourself with, and much more honest with yourself to know what you need, to allow your body to guide you, right? To allow your intuition or your instincts to kind of guide you without being trapped by your mind.
mm, mm. And when we're trying to embark on our recovery journey, it's
Mhm.
also trusting ourselves then, because often we're approaching the future that we never wanted in the first
Right,
place. We've
right.
lost the future that we wanted, haven't we? And so we're thinking, well, what do I want for my future? And actually, a lot of the time, it's not at the start what you want for your future. It's what you could bear to have in your future, because
Mhm.
you're not got the future that you wanted. And this is one of the things I see every day with CNBC ladies is they're never going to have the future that they wanted, and they can't bear the thought of having a different future. And so they stay in this place of grief and hurt for such a long time, because the alternative is not something that they can contemplate, and they don't trust themselves to come up with a future plan that is actually going to be fulfilling or have any joy in it. They just can't
Mhm.
believe that there is a future that will give those things to them.
Right.
And so they stay back where they were in their deepest, darkest depths. And, I've been there, I know what that feels like.
Mhm.
And there is a future, but I didn't trust myself to go and find a future at all, you know?
Yeah. Well, that a lot of times, and again, this is just my opinion when it comes down to being in that deep dark place, we can often associate those things. And again, this is just my opinion with the level of comfort, right? This is where I'm more comfortable at. This is where
Mm,
we can distort the reality and go, this is my safe space. This is where can't nobody
mm,
touch me, because in that place we can build up some pretty high walls, right?
mm,
And and a lot of times what we do is that we will build up the high walls, but then we can build layers of those walls, and to as a brace, right? So say for instance, I you can meet someone, they can be pretty good people, but your walls are already up. So you already have them more than arm distance away, although you are having it, you can put on a mask and put on a smile and go, you can pretend like you're having a great time, right? But I think those walls will actually, will actually make you point to people's red flag, and it's an excuse to bring up another wall, and it makes it easier for us to walk away from people in those moments as well. But again, this is just an opinion that I've developed along the way, and I could be wrong. those who are tuning in, you guys put some comments in the questions or comments in there. Let me know what you think about that. But I posed that question to you as well. What do you think about that aspect of it? Because grief can be a very tricky thing when um, we're walking in it, or sometimes walking against it.
Yeah, no, I think you've got a very good point there, Tony. And one thing that I notice now that I've done a lot of my journey is those people that are putting up those walls, that have them around them when I meet them. And often they're the people that ask me what I do as a job, and I say I'm a grief coach, and they're, whoa, yeah, no, not going to ask anything about that. And they're off because they're too vulnerable. And obviously I don't push that. I don't say anything more to them. I just think, okay, hopefully you'll come find me when you're ready to come find me.
Right.
Yeah, we can see it in others now only because we've seen it in ourselves. So definitely what you say resonates with me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is the other side to it is, and I'm glad that you brought that up when we ask people, come find me when you're ready. A part of that can be very tricky as well, especially, in my aspect, because I work with a lot of men. And, I've seen the other side when we wait for people to come to us. Sometimes they never come to us. And then, we find ourselves, um, in a very tricky situation. Yeah, and what I mean by that, the amount of men that commit suicide or homelessness, or, in addiction, and all of these different things, and I'm also a firm believer, inside of that moment, I may go, come find me, but I'm also that guy that will pick up the phone and call you and say, hey, what's going on with you, just to check up on you, right? Because we never know what the next person is thinking about or what they're going through in those moments. So, and this is just me again, as a grief worker, I think it's, I believe it's our job to bridge that gap, to do the things that are necessary, right? The hard things, to pick up the phone and call, to stop by and to make sure that you're okay. And things like that, especially if I have your information, I may come by unannounced just to make sure that you're okay. And you may not even open up the door or something like that. But it's the fact of that when you look out that door, you are going to see my face, and I may I may just go to the store and grab something and bring it back to your house and leave it outside your door just to let you know I was thinking about you. Right. And I think it's that one little act of servitude can change the dynamic of how people will interact with their grief moving as they begin to grow forward.
Well, and let's face it, we both would have loved if somebody had identified some of the needs in us and just done those things when we were in our deepest, darkest places. And that, perhaps we didn't have anyone in our lives who really spotted what our situation was at that time, but just to have somebody acknowledge, to validate where you are, it's really valuable, actually, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. But that's where I think everything changed in the world, right? Because now we're starting to see the importance of showing up, right? And holding space with those individuals. And holding space can mean a bunch of different things to a lot of different people. But as those that work in the grief and trauma field, holding space can mean a definition of being a really good visitor. And what I mean by that, when you go into someone's space, you treat it as if it's a very clean home, right? You gotta watch, how you step, because you don't want to change the dynamic of the situation and turn it to where, you can make it about you or and take away from that person, but you respect that person's home by visiting, like, and by visiting, like making sure that they have everything that they need instead of focusing the time and the energy of trying to take care of me in their space. Because I think, I believe that a lot of times grievers, we're so used to taking care of everyone else that we forget to allow other people to take care of us. And sometimes it has to be a way of, just taking over the situation, going, no, you sit down, right? You sit down. They're not necessarily saying, no, I'm going to take care of you, but actually doing the act of taking care of that individual, and again, I think that we're in a stage now to where it becomes more and more important to do those things for the individuals, so they don't feel as if their conversation or their emotions are a burden to someone, um, but to allow them the space to not only be open and vulnerable, but to begin to help those walls crumble around them that they've put up. It's establishing a level of trust within those within that time frame.
Mm, for sure. Yeah. And not responding when somebody has a show of emotion other than to be with them, because
Mhm.
one of the things we're inclined as a human race to do as soon as somebody cries is hand them a tissue, or say, oh no, you'll be fine, or something like that. And we shut down their emotions immediately that we do that. We stop them. They were just trusting us by crying in our presence, and we reward that by responding in a way that stops them fully allowing those emotions to come out. And when you talk about holding space, just being with somebody, allowing them, is so crucial to just giving them a better day, really, because once those emotions have come out, there's that release of the endorphins. They feel a lot better just
Mhm.
letting those emotions out, and they've trusted us enough to do it. The one thing we can do is just allow.
That's very, very true. And I want to add to that as well, because when a lot of times what we as human beings do, we have a really bad tendency of comparing, you know, comparing our grief journey to that person who's grieving,
Mm-hmm.
and invalidating them for the most part. I've seen that happen so many times to where I had to come up with a sheet that says, "Hey, we're going to respect the person that's speaking right now," and instead of jumping in and going, "Well, I went through this, and when I lost it," instead of comparing, we respect and uplift and speak life and
Mm,
love into that individual to show that support. And I think that's really important to understand. And it's no fault to anyone else. It's something that becomes natural for us. As there was a term a long time ago. It's called comparing war stories, right? It was a rapper that said it. Anybody who's familiar with the lyrics, you know who it comes from. But it was like they're comparing war stories. Who has gone through the worst things, right? It'd be something so small. But I think when it comes to men, it's it's how we show um, is competition. Yours
mm.
can't be as bad as mine. You know what I'm saying? Because I went through this, right? You know what I'm saying? It's a competition. So it's comparing, and then next thing you know, they're comparing who had the best, who had the awesome car back in 1964. You know what I'm saying? Versus 1976, right? And it becomes something out of whack, and all of a sudden, now we're in a place to where no one's getting what they want, and those individuals would find themselves in a really, really dark place and deeper in the mud than what they started, which really, in a lot of ways, will deter people from from searching or seeking out the necessary support that they need because of that incident.
Oh, yes. I mean, a friend of mine who lost her mum at 97 a few years ago, 97, 98, whose mum had been bedridden for a good few years and had no quality of life, but she loved her mum. She was devoted to her mum. And a friend said to her when her mum died, oh, well, you know, she was old and she didn't have a quality of life. And my friend was outraged, genuinely, and quite rightly so, because her feelings had instantly been invalidated by a close
Yeah,
friend who thought that they were saying something encouraging and supporting, and they weren't. And to this day, you know, her mum died about 2.5, 3 years ago. She still says to me, God, that hurt. You know, when that was said to me, that hurt. And so many comments are made like that. You know, somebody hears that you've lost a loved one and they say, oh yeah, well, I know exactly how that feels because I lost my auntie. No, you don't know how it
right.
feels
Yeah,
because you're not me. I'm not you. I don't know how you felt. And as you said just now, grief is not a competition at all.
yeah. And that's, I think that's where we're starting to curve the ball a little bit in understanding, understanding that philosophy right there. It's not a competition. And secondly, there's some truths that come along with this. No, you won't ever understand the way that I feel, because the way that you grieve is going to be something totally different from the way that I grieve. The relationship that I had with the person that I lost is going to be different from the relationship that you have with that individual. And I can only use myself as an example, because I want people to understand, you know, the relationship that I may have had with my mom and dad. It's going to be different from relationship that my sister had with our mom and dad, right? And the relationship I had with, my friends is going to be totally different from the relationships that their friends have with them. And it's not a competition, it's a respect factor. It's respecting the fact of that specific relationship. I've had this said to me so many times, sitting down with families. Well, they said that, I was the special one. And we went and did this, we went and got ice cream on this day, and all of these different things. And then you hear someone say, well, on this day, we went and had cake. I tell them to stop and step back, take a breath, think about this for a minute.
Mm,
Your
mm,
relationship that you have with that individual is your special relationship that you have with that individual, and
mm.
vice versa. No one was more special than the next person. You're both going to hurt and you're going to grieve that loss. So enjoy the individual relationship that you had, because those specific memories that you had are always going to be yours. It's nothing to compare. I have a friend. He has a very unique way of helping people open up about grief, and he starts off with the 5 questions. And I just want to share one of those questions, and I'm going to share it with the audience. Hopefully he's listening, because this is one that got me. Ask yourself, what was the nickname that you had for that individual, right? And it takes you back to the nickname that you gave them. Is it the same as everyone else? That nickname has its own specific memories that's going to make you laugh, right? And it just charges that good endorphin to come out, to um, not compare, but to share.
Mm,
Oh man, I
mm,
remember when such and such did this. Oh my God. Right? And then you may remember how that individual got that nickname and who
mm,
gave it to him. So it opens up the doors for that path to be shared with
mm.
those individuals.
And as concerning as the comparisons are, with grief. It's also the grief expectations. When you
Mm,
have a couple, say, that are going through a childless not by choice journey,
right, right.
often you will hear the wife who is, or the female partner who is, has more heightened emotions generally than the male, who's more likely to hide his emotions. They will have an expectation for their male partner to be grieving in the way that they're grieving, and to hit the same lows as they're hitting on the same days as they're hitting those lows. And it causes antagonism in the relationships, and a lot of
Mhm.
relationships break down on the CNBC journey because of that expectation that because I'm feeling X, Y, and Z, he should be feeling it,
Right, right.
and it's very difficult for a lot of people to understand about the individuality of the grief journey, about the individual emotions that each person feels. And a lot of the time, the man might feel a responsibility because, hey, men are protectors quite often.
Right,
Um,
right.
and so they might keep that stiff upper lip, try and hold back their emotions because they want to appear strong and supportive.
Mhm.
And neither party is understanding where the other is coming from. And that can be ever so difficult for the two of them to work through because they're at a different stage of their journey at the same time.
That's very true. And I want to add to that because as you were saying that, it was something that dawned on me, something I figured out a long time ago. When men and women grieve or going through something very similar, you hit on some really good points. Men are expected to provide and protect. But here's where it gets kind of hairy because we played a role, right? We played a role, and what we do, we trade off, and we tell our significant others, or unknowingly, this is what we do. We give them the space to grieve. We want to support them, but we still have to, provide and protect. We got to provide for the home, so we still want to go to work. We still want to protect you. That's why we don't use our feelings, or talk about them because we don't want to take away from what you're going through. We want to be there to make sure. We want to support you. So it may, on the outside looking in, look as if I don't care, or I'm not grieving the way that you see fit, but I'm taking care of these things. And I've put aside my grief. I've put aside, I'm holding it until I can know that you're okay. And here's where we find ourselves in trouble.
Mm,
Because when we see that you're in a good place, we go, we breathe, and we expect we expect it back in return. Allow me the time to go grieve as well. Allow me the time, so I've given you this time, allow me to go do it. And what ends up happening is that our counterparts would go, well, what's wrong with you? I don't know why you feel this way. You should have been grieving when I was grieving.
yeah, yeah.
And so now we're at a loss for words because I already don't understand my emotions, but I'm thinking to myself, like, hold on, I did what I was supposed to do, or what I assumed I was supposed to. I did what I was supposed to do. I I took care of the home. I took care of, I made sure that you didn't have to do the dishes or cook dinner. I made sure that you were taken care of. But you're in a good spot right now. What about me?
Mm,
And now they go, well, you should have been taking care of yourself as I was taking care of myself. And so
mm,
that's when we take that deep sigh and we go, no one cares about what I'm going through. So what was
mm,
the, okay? So I just need to just keep my mouth shut and just deal with
mm-hmm.
this as I go along. And now
Yeah.
here's this downside, and the sad part about it is
Mm,
it's a surprise when I don't want to be around you.
Mm,
It's a surprise when I've just given you divorce papers.
mm,
It's a
mm.
surprise when I go and find other alternatives to deal with this mess that I'm now in, this darkness. So the drugs and alcohol, the friends that I'm hanging around with, it's a surprise when I've just taken my life. That's when
Mm,
everybody go, I don't know what happened.
mm.
But it's written on the walls. And
Oh,
so I think that's where the education needs to come in, because when and I love the fact that you brought up the child is not by choice, because a lot of times what people don't understand, that men do grieve that as well, and
they
it's the
do.
same scenario, right?
Mm,
I'm going to I know, look, I know that you're going through something. I love you so much that I'm going to make sure that you are supported and taken care of. But allow me my space whenever you get done, because both of us together in a bad place, that's not going to, it may not work. So I need to make sure that, I'm making sure that I'm taking care of everything that you would take care of, in
mm.
hopes that you would give it back in return.
And once we shut down that dialogue, it's very difficult to open the lines of communication
Yeah.
again, because we've likely said some unkind things to each other. We've made some
Hmm.
accusations about, well, you're not grieving as much as me, type of comments. And, all the, we've heard them all, it's human nature to feel it that way. And especially we hit out to those closest to us when we're
Yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
in that vulnerable situation, and our partner is the one that we probably can't tell our deepest darkest thoughts to, really, if we're being honest about it. So we get into that spiral of the communication is horrendous, and we communicate with barbed comments and um, rolling eyes and the whole compendium of rule 101 not to do in a relationship, really. And once we're in that spiral, it's a very difficult journey to get off of. And we're already on the grief journey, and then we're dealing with a relationship that's also deteriorating. And
Hmm.
it's just overwhelming at that point, really. It's just what you can't work out what to deal with, because you can't work out what emotion you're experiencing is relating to what aspect of your journey. You can't separate them out and deal with them.
That's very true. There was a phrase that I started saying when, as I was going through my grief journey, and I realized what was going on early on with people, the interaction that I would have with people. I was quick to disappear, and I would disappear for long periods of time, and I would pop back up, and people go, "Where was you at?" And this, that, and other, and I would go, "You know what? I'm just better off on my own.
Mm,
You're not going to allow me to express myself. So there's no reason why I should be around you.
mm,
I'm better
mm,
off on my own." Now, when I started saying that, I had already gotten to a point to where I could detach myself from people, places, and things, because I never wanted to take things personal. But I couldn't sit around and struggle with that notion of not being able to take it personal, because I wanted to take it personal, but I didn't want to latch out to people. And with
mm,
that lack of
mm,
understanding, the other side of it was, it's better it's better that I don't say anything, because for one, a few things are going to happen, and I know these things are going to happen. You're going to talk over me because you don't want to hear what I have to say.
mhm,
You're going to then start to compare your journey to mine. I really don't want to hear that neither. Or you're going to say, well, at least they're in a better place. I've heard that several times. And I definitely don't want to hear that neither, because I can come back and be real smart about my, when it comes down to it. And I didn't want to do that. So I eliminated that, and I would go, I'm better off on my own. And that's, you know, now it wasn't a bad thing, right? It wasn't a bad thing because in my loneliness, as you said before, we can be around a bunch of people and still be alone. You just have distractions. You just have the extra noise back there. But I was okay with the silence, being left alone in my thoughts, and you know, being able to develop um, as I went through that silence, right? Because even when there was nobody around me, I was able to explore. And, you know, these are the things that I started to develop, the tools that I started to develop in my grief journey and not even knowing it. In my silence, I was able to sit with my grief. I began to learn from it, unknowingly learn from it. Uh-oh, we lost her. She's okay. Well, I'm going to finish talking and hopefully she jumps back on. But hopefully you guys can relate to this. But I began to learn from my grief and sit with it in that hurricane, and begin to allow my grief to teach me as I began to move forward. And it did bounce me around a lot. It bounced me around. And then I would have to go back in there and learn how to pick apart certain things that I was not aware of and begin that healing process. So, and as a man, you know, I had to also look at the situation of how much I did not know to allow myself the openness to learn. And I love that, you know, when Judi jumps back on, I'm gonna ask a few more questions to her. But you guys, you know, share your thoughts and comments in that aspect, you know, as we wait for Judi to jump back on. But it's you know, one of the things I've often learned, grief is a shared human experience, although the next person may not understand it. It's what you learn and what you're willing to give up in order to have something replace it, something good, something soft, something that you can hold on to and feel that love and compassion within yourself. So in turn, you can then be more empathetic and open, and maybe, just maybe, begin to enjoy your life from a different perspective in a new reality that you're in. So, you know, and as a men's grief coach, you know, it's really difficult for men to not only acknowledge those emotions, but to have words that go along with them, you know, and that's I'm a huge component in that. Learning the words that go along with your emotions is important, because we can have 5 basic emotions that we put them in, but not everything is black and white. You know, you have to be able to you know, add a different language to it. And Judi is back. Thank you, Judi, for jumping back on. I was just explaining to the audience, you know, what the importance of being able to have that language that comes along with grief, you know, and you know, and the importance of being able to support each other in that grief journey, right? You know, without the expectations or without the words that you may use in a similar situation, right? But having a little bit more compassion and understanding, and maybe just sometimes just not saying anything, just being in those moments as we begin to move through that grief journey. So
oh, sure.
I'm not quite sure where you dropped off at, or what do you remember from what I was saying?
Well, my screen literally went blank and the call went off. So It was all a bit of a surprise, Tony, to be quite honest with you.
That's okay. These things happen, right? These
Uh,
things happen.
yeah,
It's an honor.
yeah.
We're international. We're in the UK, man. And there's nothing more fabulous than that. I get to talk to Judi in the UK today.
We're all over the world, Tony. Yeah, where were we? I think we were talking about the miscommunications with people, the expectation that because we're going through the same grief situation, that we grieve in the
Mhm.
same way, we feel the same emotions, those same emotions lead to an identical grief journey. And
Right.
we know that if three children lose a parent, those three children have lost the same person, but their grief journeys are completely different. So
Exactly.
if you get a couple in a marriage who lose a child, or embark on a CNBC journey, their grief is going to be different to each other. And
Mhm.
being curious rather than judgmental is okay for me to say now, because I understand that. But it's nigh on impossible when you're on that journey to wonder what the other person's feeling and be open to it, because you're so keen for them to feel as bad as you do. Let's
Mhm.
face it, we don't want somebody else to be journeying easier through that grief, do we now? Because we know how bad we feel. So, it's like, well, why are you doing better than I am? You
Yeah.
should be doing at least as badly as I am. And as you say, we're back to
Yeah.
that competition again, aren't we?
Yeah. When a lot of times when I do talk with couples, you know, it's pretty. I find it fascinating, and I may chuckle at this a little bit because it's almost very similar across the board. When I talk to the women, they always go, "Well, how do I get them to talk?" You know, well, we're right here. What do I need to do? And things like that. I want to be able to talk on these times and these days and this, that, and another. And I often step back and I go, let me just put this out here real quick, and something to think about because it's a universal fact. Just because you're ready to talk doesn't mean that they're ready to talk, right? And that's the truth. Just because you're ready to talk doesn't mean that I'm ready to talk. I may just want to be in my own world for a little bit, right? Let me go, and do something creative. Let me go hang some shells or something. Let me go work on an old car. Let me gather my memories and my thoughts together for a minute, you know. But also, it's important to keep that lane of communication, and it's a very subtle way that we can talk to each other to remind each other that we're still there, right? You can come through, hey, how you doing today?
Mm,
No, you don't want to talk right now, but whenever you get ready to, just let me know.
mm,
And it's really just that simple. Now, when you do those things, you have to keep in mind, if you open up that door, it's such a vulnerable place for anyone to step into. But once they step into it, the goal is it's not to shut the door on their foot.
mm,
And it
mm,
goes back to that basic saying, what we were talking about before. Don't compare your loss to mine, right? Don't do that. If you want me to come, because as soon as you do that, I'm going to shut down. I'm going to shut you out, and you'll never be able to get there. As soon as you compare something to what I'm going through, or you try to make what I'm going through about you, I'm pretty much going to go, well, you gave it a shot, but I'll never walk through that door again. Because for one, you've just proven to me what society has already taught me, that
mm,
no one
mm,
cares about what I'm going through. So why would I bother to open up that door if just to get shut down again? I'm gonna have to, you know, repair that wound.
mm,
And I'm
mm,
gonna have to do it the best way. And the best way that I know how is by myself. Now,
mm,
and another important factor, in the community of childless not by choice, Do you find that community has grown, or have people have been more open about that community now? Now that it's out in the open, it's not such a huge secret anymore.
Yes, yeah. It's a huge relief for people to find that
Mhm.
there are others like them. Most people think of childless not by choice due to infertility journeys, for example.
Right.
And actually, most of the journeys are a lot more complex. They're more along the lines of mine, whereby there may have been some things said to them in childhood that started putting them off having children, just in the backs of their minds, not really something that they recognize, but it's that conditioning we have as of
Mhm.
early learnings. And then they may have been in dysfunctional relationships, and often, of course, these stem from our childhood relationships, as you know.
Right.
um, so there'll be a combination of factors that come about before they even get to the stage where they're thinking of having a family.
Mhm.
So a lot of people will not have had children because their circumstances have led them that way. They've never been in a relationship where they were safe enough to have them, or where the other person wanted to have them, or but they've been in a relationship where infertility was an issue, and then when that relationship's broken down, they spent a long time grieving. They've met their next partner too late to embark on a family, that sort of thing. So there can be many, many reasons, and a lot of people attach shame to this. I
Mhm.
failed. I didn't find somebody. Nobody wanted to be with me. Nobody wanted to reproduce with me. And so actually admitting that is quite tough for people. So getting into a CNBC group where they can say, well, look, these are the reasons that I ended up CNBC, and it's validated for them. Because if somebody hasn't actually tried to have children, but their life has been a series of events that's made it not conducive to have children, they question whether they made a choice not to have them, or whether circumstances led to them not having them.
Right.
And having that validation that yes, it is not by choice, because you would have had them in an ideal world, it's just the stars didn't align for you to have children. Validating that that's where they are is a good start, because they can understand what box they belong in, because we all want to belong somewhere, don't we?
Right.
If we don't belong in a parent box, where do we belong? Because there's this space, and we don't know where to put ourselves in that space.
Mhm. I totally agree with that, and I love that you brought that up. That space is a very it can be a very fragile place for people, not understanding where you belong, um, feeling alone. And it goes back to the analogy of building those walls, right? Because that space, that box that you're in, can be the walls that you've just put around you. And and don't get me wrong, they do serve a purpose. They
Mm,
do serve a purpose of protecting you.
mm,
Um, and but now here's the challenge. When do you not feel as if you have to protect yourself along this journey?
mm. Yeah,
You know, yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. That's the difficult one. I think one thing that I'm hearing from perhaps people who are way further forward on their CNBC journey, perhaps people in their 60s, is that it's always there.
Mhm.
Some people may have been on more of a journey of recovery than others. Some people just exist because they haven't understood that they could work through the layers of grief. So they're still sitting there with a lot of grief. And though that grief has faded, the acute pain is still there at times. So
Right.
I think everybody is different, even those who have processed their hurt, who've planned their alternate future and are living their alternate future will still get those acute hurt moments when their friends have grandchildren, when it's Christmas and they're single and everybody else is having family time, or just when their friend comes along wearing a t-shirt that says loving grandma on it, or there's a multitude of times. It's very, very difficult to journey completely out the other side and unscathed. And I think anybody's grief journey has an element of that in it. We always have an element of that grief left in our life because we've had to incorporate it into our future. We don't park it in our past. It still comes with us, doesn't it?
Right.
And I think that because there hasn't been the support for people on a CNBC journey, there's a lot of people who are still a casualty of it, who've done their best to sort of get on, but maybe are still partially treading through that minefield of emotions and finding those triggers on a quite regular basis. And part of what I'm trying to do is lessen those triggers for people so that they have less days where they take a step back on their grief journey and more days when they take a step forward on it.
Yeah. There was I was talking with someone, and when I say this, I also come in with the notion of there's no right or wrong way to do your grief. You have to do the grief the way you can do your grief, because you get to customize the way that you grieve. That's the beautiful thing about it, and I think people sometimes forget that. But I was talking with this guy, and he was telling me about a story about his friend, and he goes, and sometimes you just got to kick away the shovel. And I told him, I said, okay, I said, why would you interfere with that? He goes, what do you mean? I saw him going down this rabbit hole, and I just couldn't stand by. And so I kicked away the shovel. I said, did it work? He goes, no. I said, why do you think it didn't work? He goes, well, I don't know. I said, I'm gonna give you, I'm gonna give you a little something. A lot of times when you take away the shovel, people will feel stuck. You're not supposed to take away the shovel for the simple fact of, in order for a person to get to a place to where they can actually admit that they need help, they have to reach their version of rock bottom. And sometimes that's allowing that individual to dole that shovel out to where it's just a stick. You may not like it. It may pain you to watch your loved one or your friend, someone that you care about, go through this. Here's the truth of the matter about it is, it's not your storm to interfere with. See, a lot of people stop the process of letting someone become who they're supposed to be. You have to hit your version of rock bottom. The key to it is to make sure that you're there when they need you the most. And make sure you're there to wipe their foreheads or give them a glass of water. But root them on. Root them on. Let them know that you're still there and that you care about them. That's the key to it is, right? If I see you going through something, I'm not going to interfere with your storm. It's yours. I don't know what you asked. So I don't want to interfere with you becoming that butterfly that you're supposed to be, because it's not my story. It's yours. But that's my thoughts on it. That's my thoughts on it.
And I think as well, when we think we've hit the bottom, we generally haven't. We've got a bit further to go, haven't we?
Right, just a little bit.
That's what I found. I bet you found the same thing. And then when we really do hit the bottom, it's actually quite a shock. It's like, good grief, who ever knew that it could get as far down as that? But that's the time when you actually take that small step to start climbing out, because you have hit the
Yes.
bottom, and there is a little bit of a bounce at the bottom, isn't there? To just
Just a
go,
little bit.
well, just a little bit up. Yeah.
There's a little bit of a bounce that goes along with that, you know. But again, it's your testimony, because that
Mm-hmm.
climb back out, that version that you become when you climb back out, that's that's the one that's going to go out here and change how people view you in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That portion of you, that change, right? That change that you go through, your grief is meant to change you.
Mm-hmm.
It's meant to give you a choice. It's meant to go, you can have this over here if you're willing to give up this over here. Or you can hold on to this right here, and I'll keep you at this level. But I'm not going to keep you there. See, again, it goes back to what I said in the beginning, learning to trust yourself. That trust is earned.
Mm-hmm.
Have you trusted yourself enough to take all of this crap that's been piled upon you and stop it underneath your feet, and begin to, build something out of that, so you can, begin to go towards that little light at the top of your home, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where you started off from, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that you're down here, let's work on the things that you didn't address, and let's begin to understand why these things happen, and then let's begin the healing process. And that's what it is, the stairway of grief. I find that, and I can't express it enough. I find it to be a beautiful place when you can see that stairway and begin to build those steps, those stepping stones to go back up. Because when you come back up, I want to hear about your journey,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm excited to see, because I know who you started off as. And then when you may come back up, you may be a little beaten and battered, you know what I'm saying, those wounds. But I want you to tell me about those wounds.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, I got this when I was doing this right here. Yeah, man, that was rough. Oh,
You used a word there that I think is so key: excited. I realised that I was doing good on my journey when I became excited, when I realised, amongst all those emotions, some of which that we struggle to put a name to, I thought, oh my God, I'm feeling excited. So I thought, well, let's see what we're feeling excited about. And I realised I was feeling excited for my future.
yeah, yeah,
And, I guess you've been there too. And I think for me, that was the realization that I was going to be okay, that
yeah,
I would have some dips in my emotions, but I was going to be okay. And the realization that comes with that is immense. It really is.
yeah.
Excitement for your future, a future that I never wanted to face in the first place, but actually I became excited about it.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful feeling. Absolutely amazing.
And I think that's why we do the work that we do, because of
Mm,
that excitement that we felt as we begin to grow into our future, as we begin to heal and grow into our authentic selves. We want that for other people, and we develop
mm,
ways of helping people move through, right,
mm,
and get to that place of excitement. It's
mm,
that's I believe that's our job as servants to our communities,
mm,
to open up the doors and begin to structure it out to where people can individualize their journey to excitement.
mm.
And then from there, maybe they can reach out to the next person that's going through it and share their excitement through their testimony, and maybe how they did it. And maybe that person that's listening can take something from that and develop their own stairway. right? Because I'm a firm believer, Judi. We're just here walking each other home, right?
Mm.
I'm just walking you to your next destination. I'm not meant to walk with you all the way home, but I can walk you to the next destination. Because as grief workers, as grief coaches, anybody in the grief and healing field, you guys have heard me say this before. People will always remember the way that you made them feel. They may not remember your name, but they may not even remember your face totally. But when they walk past you, they're gonna go, "That's that guy, or that's that girl. That's whomever, right?" They was, oh my God, they're gonna remember that feeling. The body always keeps track of all of that. So make sure that we leave each other in good places when we walk with them. Make sure that we support them and speak life and love into them. You know, because you never know what demons that person is facing, right? And to never take anything away from them, but to add value to their journey, if you can. And if you can't, do your best to be just a good human being as they're going through that human experience. You know, Judi, I want to thank you. I want to say thank you for being on the show today and sharing your knowledge and your journey. Such a beautiful, beautiful journey. And I always like to end with this. If you could leave the audience with something today, what would you leave them with?
Well, I actually read a quote yesterday, and this really resonated with me. Life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up and totally worn out, and proclaiming loudly, "Wow, what a ride." Now, if I can help my clients to think at the end, "Wow, what a ride," rather than, "Good God, that was the worst journey ever," then my job is done. So if we can help one person go from hopelessness to hope, our job is done, Tony. So thank you for having me.
Oh man, the pleasure was mine. Where can people find you?
Okay, so my business is Embrace Your Future. You can find me at embraceyourfuture.net, or you can find me on Facebook at CNBC Grief by Embrace Your Future. And I'm sure Tony's going to put a link on this podcast that you
Oh,
can
you
click
already
on.
know it.
Yes, I
You
do.
already know it.
I do, Tony. Absolutely.
Well, again, thank you for tuning. Thank you for being on the show today. We definitely have to do this again. Enjoyed talking with you. For everyone else who have joined in, if you made it this far, I want to say thank you for that. Thank you for tuning in. And you know, everybody on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Twitch, and Rumble, and you know, guys, thank you for your support. If you made it this far and you haven't already, do me a favor, share this with someone who can benefit from the conversations that we have. And also, I'm always looking for guests. So if you have a story that you would like to share on the podcast, please reach out to me and let me know. I would love to have you on. And most importantly, if you haven't already, go to the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification, leave a comment. This helps us get this conversation out there to more and more people. And you know, and it helps show the support that you guys have for these conversations that we have. Remember, I am Tony Lynch. I'm the host of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast, and we look forward to having many, many more conversations and having you guys tune in. So just remember, you know, just walking each other home. So until the next episode, you guys, make sure you're out there creating good memories with good people and making them feel good about themselves in their journey. See you guys in the next one. You guys have a wonderful day. Peace.
Goodbye.